Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. I'm Anand Narasimhan. First up, ladies and gentlemen, the good things about Bharat. The central government has approved a 4% hike in dearness allowance ahead of Deepavali. With that, the DA and relief being paid to central government employees will be 46% from the earlier 42%. The number of pilgrims visiting the Char Dhams in Uttarakhand has exceeded 50 lakh for the first time. The famous pilgrimage sites in Uttarakhand have attracted a record number of pilgrims from both Bharat and abroad. JP Morgan's Managing Director of Asia Pacific Equity Research, James Sullivan, has said that Bharat will become the world's third largest economy by 2027. He's further added that we as a nation will reach $7 trillion by 2030. As the nation is transitioning into electric vehicles, the sales in India are likely to grow by over 1.6 crore. That's welcome news. Annual electric vehicles that are estimated to be deployed across our country by 2030. Maharashtra and Delhi are forecasted to operate with the highest number of charging stations across the country too. And with all of that, let's set up the conversation for this evening. And this is a conflict that could soon escalate into a greater battle among nations. This is a fight of a nation against a terrorist outfit, but could things change drastically and dynamically within a matter of hours, especially if the terror outfit is able to spin the kind of narrative it attempted to around the hospital explosion inside the Gaza Strip.
About a week ago, made a statement in which he said, evacuate the hospitals are target, and in fact they hit one hospital a week ago. So their intentions is evacuate or hospitals will be hit, and they are responsible for that crime, and they cannot fabricate stories to deal with it.
We confirmed that there was no IDF fire by land, sea or air that hit the hospital. Second, our radar system tracked rockets fired by terrorists from within Gaza at the time of the explosion.
Explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you.
I can assure you, Mr. President, Israel is united to defeat Hamas. And we will defeat Hamas and remove this terrible threat from our lives.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Israel-Hamas fight seems far from over. It's day 12 of this conflict and matters only seem to be taking a more aggressive turn. A strike in Gaza hit the Al-Ahli Baptist Hospital on Tuesday, and at least 500 people are feared dead. Hamas and later the Palestinians claimed that it was an Israeli bombing that killed hundreds. Arab nations joining in the condemnation, with some calling for action against Israel. Israel, on the other hand, has shared what it claims is evidence to prove that they didn't do it. The Israeli Defense Force, or the IDF, presenting both visual and audio proof to back their claims on what happened at the Gaza hospital, saying it was not them behind the strike at the Gaza hospital, but Hamas's Islamic Jihad at work. Now, if you were to go by that recording, ladies and gentlemen, one of the Hamas operatives actually says, thank God it fell where it fell. So the Hamas is looking at it as a God-sent opportunity for them to spin the narrative. If we were to go by that audio recording, and we'll play that transcript through the course of the conversation again here on The Right Stand, and you can see what the translation actually says between the two operatives. This is as released by the IDF. I want to underline that. So here's what the IDF claims. There is no evidence of a direct hit on the Al-Ahli Al-Arabi. That's the hospital. No structural damage to nearby buildings that happened. There are no craters that are consistent with an IDF airstrike. So that's the site of the fire, and you can see the pictures. And there is no crater-like creation which happens when the rocket missile lands. No craters consistent with an airstrike. Hamas has realized it was an Islamic Jihad misfire. Hamas has launched a campaign with inflated numbers of deaths, and 450 rockets fired from Gaza over the last 11 days have actually fallen short of Israel and landed on the Gaza Strip itself, in Gaza itself. That's what the IDF claims. Now, the explosion at the hospital has also derailed diplomatic efforts by the US as Jordan cancelled the summit with Joe Biden, the Egyptian Palestinian leaders, to discuss the entire Gaza matter. It was supposed to be scheduled in Amman. In fact, Tony Blinken was actually there in Amman, and that meeting got cancelled, and Biden then heads straight to Tel Aviv. Joe Biden, after meeting the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, said United States stands with Israel and its people. Biden also added that he was sad and outraged by the explosion at a hospital in the Gaza Strip and said that the attack seems to have been done by the other team and not Israel. Meanwhile, Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu sent out a global message urging the world to unite in this fight against Hamas, because Biden said that Hamas is making the ISIS look rational. This brings us to the larger question. Was there a plot to try and twist this entire narrative around the Israel-Hamas conflict? And with Biden backing Israel, is the end Hamas operation still on course? Meanwhile,
Hello, Moto.
let's go across straight to our guest now. Joining us this evening, Glenn Carl, former National Intelligence Officer, where he was with the CIA. He's now an author and also a commentator on various affairs across the globe. Rachel Azaria, former Deputy Mayor Jerusalem, with us. Dalal Irikat, columnist, is also with us. Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, former diplomat, with us. And Tara Karta, distinguished fellow IPCS and also former director of the National Security Council Secretariat. Namaste. Thank you very much to everybody for joining us here on this show. I'm going to ask Ms. Rachel Azaria first. Do you agree with the IDF's claims, or do you have reasons to believe that that could have been an Israeli strike at the hospital? Because the Palestinians have alleged that this is Israel's way of trying to force an evacuation out of the Gaza Strip.
This would never be a strike from Israel, never in our life. I can tell you that my husband works in intensive care, children intensive care in a hospital in Jerusalem, and we receive on daily basis babies from the Gaza Strip that have heart problems, and we take care of them all the time. We never, ever would do anything like that. ISIS, Hamas, the people that we're dealing with, that is their way of fighting. They kill children, they kill elderly people. We do everything we can not to harm the people that are uninvolved whenever we attack in the Gaza Strip. But as you saw, the Hamas people that were talking about it, they said, thank God it hit that way. Thank God it hit the hospital, because that's how we can spin it over on Israel. All of the missiles are being shot from near hospitals and near schools. And that's what makes it very difficult for us in Israel. And every time there is any kind of attack, we need to be very careful, and we take all the measures we can to make sure that we don't harm the people that aren't involved in the fighting. But when we have ISIS against us, and this ISIS is not far away in the deserts, right around the corner. So we have to take the measures, and unfortunately, they keep shooting from hospitals. If ISIS would be fair enough not to shoot next to hospitals, the children in Gaza wouldn't have to deal with these problems. But unfortunately, this is what we have to deal with. But the babies from Gaza, as usual, are welcome to come to intensive care in Israel, in all our hospitals, to take care of the heart problems that they have. We do it all the time. We would never, ever hit a hospital. It's very misfortunate that Hamas is using their mistake, their incident, to accuse us.
Dalal Irikat, agree, disagree, because that audio recording actually has a Hamas operative saying it's God sent. Thank God it landed at the hospital. They are even confirming the shrapnel, saying it's local shrapnel, not Israeli shrapnel. The satellite images don't show a crater as an airstrike, because when there's an airstrike, there's always a crater because a missile lands there. Your thoughts, you agree, disagree with Rachel there?
Well, I think the Israelis are masters in misleading the audiences and in spinning reality. They have mastering this tactic for decades now. Let me remind you that when Shireen Abu Akleh, the fine American Christian journalist, was murdered, she was executed by the Israeli occupation forces, they said it's friendly fire. Until now, they didn't prove evidence. Later on, they labeled 6 Palestinian human rights organizations as terrorists. They said they have evidence. They never had evidence. Now, after this massacre of 500 Palestinian civilians, mostly women and children, the massacre was documented on screen. Israel found itself in trouble. So automatically they will go to misleading the audiences again. Unfortunately, the Western media outlets are adopting blindly the Israeli narrative. And this is what happens every time and then. What we are facing, allow me to contest your framing. What is happening is not a war from Israel against Hamas or against Gaza. The Israeli war criminals are waging war crimes against 2.2 million Palestinian civilians living in a big prison, 365 square kilometers, 1 million Palestinian children living in Gaza deprived from milk, no water, no medicine, no electricity, no basic human needs or human dignity or rights. This should not be tolerated. Diplomacy had failed the Palestinian civilians. Let me reiterate, it is the 2 million Palestinian civilians living in Gaza. Article 146 of the 4 Geneva Conventions obliges every member state to hold the Israeli criminals accountable. Netanyahu and his far-right government are the ones responsible to the level of violence and massacres that we are facing. Let me finish, please.
Yeah,
the
please,
Palestinian people have endured 16 years of deadly blockade in Gaza, deprived of basic minimum human rights. For 75 years, the Palestinian people have been struggling for freedom. We have endured all kinds of injustices, of apartheid, of extrajudicial killings, of detentions, of settler colonialism, of confiscations of land, of settler terror, all under a framework of a prolonged military.
Okay, now you'll have to yield. You'll have to yield, Dalal Erikat. You have to yield because Rachel has the right. No, Rachel has the right, but you also have to yield, ma'am. You cannot make it a monologue and a speech. You have to present your point of view, and you have to yield.
You are okay. Just go ahead.
You have to yield. Rachel, you want to? Rachel, respond. I'm not coming in between. Rachel wanted to respond. Let her respond, and Dalal, you can then counter. Ms. Dalal, then you can counter.
Sure.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
I want to say a few points. First of all, we evacuated the Gaza Strip many years ago. And unfortunately, instead of turning the Gaza Strip with its beautiful beach into an amazing land that Palestinians can live there beautifully and enjoy their time, Hamas took over. Hi, ISIS. Hamas took over, shooting, bombing over hospitals. Why do they do that? Why do they do that? Don't they care about the babies that are born in the Gaza Strip? And the answer is that they don't care. You're talking about the electricity. Our taxes pay for the Gaza electricity. We do it because we care about the babies. And unfortunately, the Hamas people don't care about the Gaza babies. Not only they don't care about our babies, they don't care about their babies. Hamas, ISIS took over Gaza Strip, and they are torturing the people that live in Gaza, the children, the women, just like they're doing to us. But now they did something horrible to us, and we have to protect our babies. Unfortunately, instead of being pro-Palestinian, and thinking about the babies in the Gaza Strip, you are taking the route of horrendous people that slaughter babies, that shoot from outside of hospitals. Who does that? Who does that? Why would you take their point of view? Why won't you be with us to work together for better life in the Gaza Strip? So I know, probably you have to say that because you're part of this group. But instead of taking responsibility and working for peace in the Middle East, you're doing
right. So you are drawing Rachel now. Now let Dalal respond. Let Ms. Dalal respond before we bring in our other panelists. Now, one point is that there is a Palestinian issue and there is the Hamas, which has been branded as terrorists. Now, any outfit that uses women and children as shields, or it is operating out of areas which are close to civilians, is not an outfit that needs to be backed by anybody. There is a two-state issue, that is Israel and Palestine, and there is no ignoring that aspect. And here on CNN News 18, Ms. Dalal, we've spoken to Mr. Prime Minister Ehud Barak, we've spoken to Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. Both of them have very strong advocates of the two-state solution for Palestine too. They've come out and said, but they draw a line there between terrorism and a political fight between people for two states. So there are two different aspects there. Yes, your response or your counter to Ms. Rachel, please. And then we'll go across to our other panelists who've been listening to the ladies. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Again, I want to clarify to the audiences that what happened in 2005 was a disengagement, which was not coordinated neither with the PLO nor with the PNA, nor with any Arab leaders. The Israelis, and I quote Dov Weiss-Glass, who was the aide of Sharon at that time, he said they are implementing a policy of formaldehyde. They wanted to do a divide and rule. They have been controlling every aspect and every inch of Gaza. Yes, they succeeded in our division, the West Bank and Gaza, and this is a setback that I see on the Palestinian side. But you to claim that you left Gaza and that Hamas is ruling, this is again a misleading, a big lie to the world. Gaza was living under a prison for 16 years. The 2.2 million civilians, and I repeat, civilians who are entitled to international protections are under full control of Israeli occupation. Like people in the West Bank and in Jerusalem, we have been suffering a 75 years of Israeli prolonged military occupation. You are talking about the two-state solution? The two-state solution is the position of the international community. It was the concession that the Palestinians gave to accept 22% of mandated historic Palestine. Why? It was an expression of our will for peace and prosperity for the two peoples. What did we get after 30 years of negotiations? A sugar-coated peace process that took us to years and years of deterioration. We are being surrounded by 750,000 settlers all around. You have killed the two-state solution. You did not leave any room.
See, but the political solution does not. Now, with your kind permission, ladies. With your kind permission, ladies, if I may open up the debate to our other panelists. A two-state solution does not justify setting off 5,000 rockets or otherwise. Ms. Dalal, please yield, ma'am.
The Western media and the Israelis continue with this misleading, and the narration is adopted by the
narratives are being spun from both sides.
We are living in 2023.
Ma'am, what happened? Do you? I just want to say, as much as what happened with the hospital in the Gaza Strip is unfortunate, let us not forget the slaughtering of innocents that happened in kibbutz. With the kibbutz people, and that happened in Lior and so many other regions, not so just 10 days ago, 11 days ago. Let's not forget that. Glenn Carl, is there a solution to this? Is wiping out or destroying the Hamas infrastructure the only solution to this? Because that's what Israel wants to do now. The ideology is not the.
I can't hear.
Yeah. Yes, Mr. Glenn Carl, can you hear me? Glenn, hi. This is Anand here. Can you hear me? Am I audible to you now?
I don't hear you.
I can barely hear something.
Okay, we will try and. We'll try and fix the audio with our international guests. Just bear with me, please. Where the team is trying to fix that out. Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, is breaking down the entire Hamas infrastructure the only solution? Because these issues are something which all former prime ministers who we have on the network, who we have spoken to, have said that it's not so far away when suddenly some incident will happen which will be an unfortunate one, and the whole narrative will change against fighting a terrorist outfit towards a humanitarian aspect, and then this whole thing will then fizzle out if you want to really break down a terror infrastructure.
Well, it's already happening. In fact, it's happening more and more every day on the streets of Paris, London, Brussels, and so on, where the sympathizers of the Hamas or Palestine in general have taken to demonstrations, and in some cases violent demonstrations. Yesterday 2 people were killed in Brussels. Today there were threats to some airports in France. Where this public anger will take decision making to is difficult to say. But let me start by saying that this is not a one-front war. This is not a war between Israel and Hamas any longer. This is a multi-front war where before any incident takes place, both sides are ready with their version or their propaganda. For example, even on the hospital thing, barely had the rocket landed or the missile misfired, the Palestinian side, the Hamas side, was ready with its version. the Israel side then reacted, and the result is that both their sympathizers are now determined that the other side shall not prevail. So you are in a situation where there is a dialogue of the deaf, where you are not prepared to listen to the other side. So that is a very delicate, perhaps a dangerous situation, because it can also affect the decision making at the leadership level. It has happened in the past, even in India. It has happened elsewhere also. The second thing is that in this propaganda, you are feeding the public anger. So it has a multiplier effect. For example, the summit meeting that Biden was supposed to have with some Arab states got cancelled because Jordan was afraid that Palestinians settled there would rise up against the king.
Right.
And it has happened in 1973 when Zia butchered 3,000 Palestinians in Amman. So leadership is very aware that whatever decision they take, whatever action they take, must also have one ear to the public side of the demands and anger. So you are in a dangerous situation. If Israel escalates, Hezbollah is waiting in the wings to start its own action. If Hezbollah does not escalate and react to Israel, then Iran, its masters, will have their own agenda to advance. So that is why I said it's a multiple front war where anything could happen, even if by mischance, calculation or malintent. And all three are there in plenty in today's atmosphere.
Glenn Carl is with us. I'm just going to check if we have him with us. Can you hear me now, Glenn? Hi, this is Anand here.
I can, yes.
Yes. Your thoughts, this ending the Hamas infrastructure, America is with Israel, it says, is it as easy as it looks, or is this only going to get far more complicated in the days to come? Taraji, I'll come to you after Glenn's comments. Yes, Glenn.
Ending Hamas's infrastructure is the issue. Well, this has been the eternal problem for Israel, from Israel's perspective, from the creation of Hamas decades ago. It's an exceptionally difficult task to achieve, independent of 2.5 million Palestinians sitting, living, struggling between Hamas and the IDF, the Israeli army. And an incursion, an invasion by the Israelis into Gaza under any circumstances will cause most Muslims to explode in rage, whatever the justifications. Even if that were not the case, the challenge for the Israelis is immense, because the people in Hamas are not complete idiots, and they won't sit out in the open to let themselves be detained or killed. They will melt into the population, as they always have. They will hide under and behind the population. They literally have 500 or 700 kilometers of tunnels in under Gaza, which are a tremendous tactical problem to overcome. So it's hard to imagine how the IDF can succeed in short of causing absolute catastrophic harm to innocent people in the objective that the Israeli government has set. I think that it's a laudable one. Hamas is not really a responsible representative of the Palestinian people, but they're the ones in charge. They're the ones with guns and rockets. But I don't see how the IDF can do it without causing what we're seeing. And I'm not talking about the hospital explosion, which I think pretty convincingly has been showed not to have been from anything the Israelis have done. But the consequences are catastrophic, and guaranteed to infuriate even more the Palestinians, which is not the Israeli objective.
No, but then, Glenn, are you trying to say that a sovereign nation is at a disadvantage and a terrorist outfit is in a situation where heads they win, tails they lose? So heads they fire rockets which land on Israel, tails the rockets land on the innocent people, and then they spin the story to their advantage. How is this a solution? Because somewhere somebody has to
Yes.
stand up and say we reject the Hamas altogether, and both Israeli and Palestinian people have to do it simultaneously, and the world has to say that we got to weed this outfit out. If two nations' heads are saying that ISIS looks rational in front of the Hamas, then we have a serious problem, Glenn Carl.
Well, this is a conventional military is a poor tool to address fundamentally a terrorism problem, one, and two, a sociological, political, theological, cultural problem. And it's all of the issue is all of those. However, conventional counter-terrorist methods can parry, can stop specific attacks, can perhaps slowly eliminate or undermine a leadership. But Israelis' services are superb and have not succeeded any more than my colleagues and I succeeded in 20 years of, quote, the war on terror. Well, the expression that was used among my colleagues very quickly was playing a game of whack-a-mole. It means when an animal pokes his head above the soil, you knock it down and you think you succeeded, but then there are 500 other holes. You cannot succeed that way. The issue is fundamentally political and cultural, and certainly any country has to respond to the kind of horror that occurred in Israel, perpetrated by Hamas, but the solutions are unlikely to be successful done by conventional military means.
Because it's out there for everybody to see that the Hamas have literally dominated proceedings, and there's nothing democratic about what's happening there since 2006, 2007, ever since they've assumed power. And they've established infrastructure under the tall structures because they operate out of the tunnels under the. So it's not easy to break this down. The other thing is...
It's important to remember.
Yes.
It's important to remember what is the nature of Hamas as distinct from the aspirations of the Palestinians.
Yes.
These are not the same things.
Exactly.
Hamas was created, part of its charter calls for the killing of every Jew, everywhere. Hamas is part of its charter. Its mission, its obligation, its sacred mission is to destroy Israel. There is no coexistence possible under the framework that Hamas believes in. The Palestinians, the PLO, the authority in the West Bank, have, most of them, different aspirations. Now, many Muslims and Palestinians wish that Israel didn't exist. But most today are willing to accept that either we struggle to live together or there's no solution except for endless death. That is not the case of Hamas. And I make one other distinction.
Right.
We're blaming Hamas for the blowing up of the destruction in the hospital, the hideous event last night. Now, Hamas is exploiting it. They aren't stupid. It's obviously, instantaneously, we've seen it has already inflamed the entire Muslim world against Israel. But that was apparently not Hamas. The Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip is a different organization, equally hideous, but separate from Hamas.
I should say very honestly, if I was an Israeli with the kind of history that Israel has, and with this terrorist attack which just took place, I would see it as an opportunity to go after Hamas with everything I have. This is an opportunity. That is how I would see it if I was an Israeli. But on the other hand, the fact as counter-terrorism, someone who's been in counter-terrorism for years, this is no easy task. I mean, if you can finish it within a week, 10 days maximum, you can swing this. Beyond that, you are going to fall into this mire which Hamas has made for you. I mean, there's a different issue that I don't yet understand how Hamas or why it did such a large attack. That is still a mystery. Because it would know that Israel would come after it. Why didn't it just go after the military target? That's what it could have done, and that would have been just, we wouldn't even be talking about it. So there is a lot of things which we don't know yet. I don't think Iran has sanctioned this So far as we know, Iran has not sanctioned it. Who sanctioned this? So there is definitely, Anand, there are things that are not clear. But as a counter-terrorism, with some experience, this is not a walkover. You have to take the Palestinian people on board. You have to make sure that they are okay. That is the key to a successful counter-terrorism operation. You have to make sure that once they come across, they are looked after with everything you got. Otherwise, you're going to bring the war home. You understand? As the people come in, you're going to bring the war back to your home. This is a very, very dangerous, what should I say, it's a pause. Because let's face it, Egypt is not going to take anyone. Jordanians are not going to take anyone. I mean, regardless of the outrage. So where do these people go? So Israel's counter-terrorism strategy, key is the Palestinian people. And that is what, what India has been saying. We think we condemn Hamas with everything we have, but the Palestinian people are part. They need a solution. They need aid. They need everything that the world can give them.
Rachel, your thoughts? Agree, disagree?
So I want to say, I think everyone has responsibility for what's happening with the Palestinians. We've done everything we can to mind our own business and live our lives in peace as much as we could. We disengaged from the Gaza Strip. We got the Iron Dome. So even when the Palestinians were shooting missiles, we did everything we can so we can continue our life. Unfortunately, we're not talking about the Palestinian people. And this is a very important explanation that was being done here. That we're not talking about the Palestinian people. We are talking about a new form of ISIS, which is Hamas, and they're doing everything they can to make our life miserable. And I want to say something. Said Glenn from he said it would be very hard to deal with Hamas in the Gaza Strip. We know that. We know that. All the men I know from the age of 20 to 40 are drafted already. We know it's going to be hard. And from 18, they're already drafted all the time. We know it's going to be very hard. But we know we have responsibility for our children. We have responsibility for our elderly people. We cannot allow ourselves to live in Israel while having neighbors that come into our country and butcher children and elderly people, rape women, burn down parties that are being held, killing. No country in the world would allow themselves to live in such a consequences. So yes, we know it's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard, but we're here to fight, and we're going to protect ourselves, just like India would, just like any country in the world would do, because that's what countries have to do. Make sure their children, the babies, the elderly people, the people that are not engaged in fighting can live peacefully.
But let me ask you this before we bring in some of the other panelists. Rachel, if in 75 years this has not been solved peacefully, resolutions have not happened. I know in the past the treaties were almost signed, but somebody did not come to the table to sign at that time, and things fell off. And this happened earlier. But how is it going to happen now? Because you see what's happened. Last evening, the rocket falls on the hospital, innocents die, and even before proof is out, you have the Palestinians condemning what's happened and blaming the Israelis. You have the Arab nations already standing up for the Palestinians. And somewhere within this, Hamas then gets erased. The whole terror aspect, the fighting against a terrorist outfit aspect gets erased. What happened with the kibbutz people in Leor and some of the other areas, that gets forgotten. So this is how it's going to be, and it's already 12 days.
First of all, this is our land. This is where we live. We have no other choice. So what are you suggesting? We just stop? I mean, what can we do? Just like Biden said, the strongest weapon we have is the fact that we have no other solution. There's nowhere else we can go. We were in Europe. We were prosecuted. We were slaughtered. My grandparents escaped from Germany 80 years ago, just before the Holocaust. My parents came to Israel to live safely in Israel. We have a peace agreement with Egypt. We have a peace agreement with the Jordanians. We're always open for peace. We would love to have a peace agreement. Last time, during the negotiations with the Palestinians, Arafat decided that he can't come to the table, and he was asked years later, not Israelis, people around the world asked him, why didn't you do that? He said, I was afraid I would be assassinated. Yitzhak Rabin was willing to do everything he could to get to peace. We have no other possibility. We have to do this. We know it's going to be hard. We disengaged from the Gaza Strip. We did everything we could. Got the Iron Dome. We do everything we can to live in peace. But when you live with a group, which is ISIS, in your border, we have to do every measure possible to make sure we live in peace. And I'll just say last sentence. Every measure possible, we do it while doing everything we can to make sure that we don't hit the people that are disengaged.
Now, here is the thing. Here is the thing. You can send out flyers from the air to the Gaza strip asking the civilians to vacate the strip or go to the south of the river or to the other side of the river. You can tell them.
We do what's called knock on the door. That's the way we operate. That when the airplanes come in, we make sure that the people know that they can escape. And we know that also
But here is the question, Rachel. Where do they go? Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, before I bring in Dalal back into the conversation, I'm just going to ask this question. Where do they go, Ambassador Rajiv Dogra? Because all the other nations have said, you are not welcome here. See, this is a classic case in Syria where they all had to go everywhere else. The Rohingya had to go all the way everywhere else because the OIC did not open their doors for them. The Arab nations didn't open the doors for the Rohingya. They didn't open the doors for the Syrians. And now they are telling the Palestinians also, we will not let you in. It's the European nations which are being asked to open their doors. See, this is what's happening. So all those Arab nations who are shouting for the Palestinian cause, they are saying Palestinians are not welcome. All those who are worried about the safety of Rohingyas, etc., Syria, say at that time the conflict happened, was fight against ISIS. They closed their doors, they closed their borders, they were actually shooting people who were landing at their doors. So what humanitarian cause are they all talking about today, these 22 Arab nations, Ambassador Rajiv Dogra? And the Palestinians are not turning around and asking them, let us come and live in your land. We are also Muslims, we are Arabs, why don't you allow us to stay there? In your country there's so much of land, so much of space.
Well, Anand, you are absolutely right. Both Israelis and Palestinians find themselves between a rock and a hard place. And as far as Arabs are concerned, they have turned their back on Palestinians since the late 70s. They are sick and tired. They say, do whatever you want, don't bother us. That is the plain truth. But let me come to an issue, the larger issue which you had raised, that what now and what in future. The fact is that Hamas did not do what it did on 7th of October on a Saturday without any planning. It did what it did out of a deep conviction that we have to take it forward and we have to make it big and we have to make it the ultimate. So they want escalation, they want the Muslim world to be involved in this, and they have the backing of Hezbollah in this. And I'm sorry to differ with one of your panelists. Iran is watching this situation very carefully, and my information is that Iran was involved in the planning and also in the supply of all that resulted in death. And could result in further death.
Right.
So it's not as if some Hamas leader decided to take up a gun and shoot. The second thing is there's a big difference between terrorist organizations of the earlier times, including ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Hamas. They did not have the larger or the largest support from within the Muslim community as Hamas has. Hamas has support from the public streets, as I told you, from Paris to Washington to Turkey and to UAE and Pakistan. This kind of support was not there earlier. So it's an organization which is hard to beat and which is hard to tackle. So sympathies are growing, are there for Israel, but they will then peter away because Hamas is good at propaganda, and Hamas has a tremendous organization and backing of others who are brilliant at propaganda. So we will see and hear a lot more of it in the coming days, but I'm afraid it's not going to be very healthy or very peaceful.
Right, we're going to extend this conversation because Dalal also wanted to come in, but Rachel, you want to leave, so quick comment and then I'll bring in Dalal. Yeah.
No, I'll wait. I'll say a comment and then I'll also wait to hear Dalal.
Yeah, thanks.
Unfortunately, the Arab countries are not willing to accept Palestinians, and also we
Is that
see
how
that
you wait for me?
and and a lot of them say that they can't, they don't know what to do anymore with Hamas that became ISIS. That it's something that they don't want to deal with. It's very sad to see that the columnist that you brought is really supporting an organization that butchers women and children and that became ISIS. I think it's very hard to find around the world people that will support ISIS, and everyone has to understand that Hamas became ISIS, unfortunately, and they're not taking care of the Palestinian people. They're taking care of themselves, and they are the long hand of Iran, long arm of Iran in the Middle East, and they're busy doing.
Are you going to give me a chance to answer?
Yes. After she completes.
This is totally unacceptable.
No, after she completes, I will give you the chance to answer. You will get your 3 minutes, I promise you. Yes, Rachel, complete.
So I'm saying they became Iran that are busy trying to ruin for everyone, to ruin our life or not to make our life possible. And what we're going to do is we're going to fight for our lives. And unfortunately, other Arab countries aren't willing to accept the Palestinians. You asked where will the Palestinians go?
Enough is enough.
To the southern part of the Gaza Strip, and that way they can be safe. And Hamas doesn't let them go there because they want women and children.
If that was the case, Rachel, there would have been a large scale, if there is no support for the Hamas amongst the Palestinians, the one aspect is that the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip itself would have revolted against the Hamas. They haven't done that. Now, can you hide behind the aspect that these are civilians and what do they do against a terrorist outfit if civilian establishments are being used as bases for keeping rockets, etc. Secondly, would you disagree that the Hamas and the Palestinian issue need to be separated? They cannot be mixed. Please make your point. You've waited patiently. Please go ahead.
Well,
first,
if you want,
wait, one second. One short thing.
This is not acceptable. I mean, you're giving her all airtime.
No.
I'm sorry, just say it short. We need to separate Hamas and the Palestinians. Those are two separate issues.
That's exactly what I was asking, Ms. Dalal. Let her now. Rachel, please yield. Yes, Ms. Dalal. Go ahead, please.
Well, I think it's not okay to continue to mislead the audiences. Don't underestimate the intelligence of the people. You are saying that, Israel is waging a war, massacres that are documented on the screens against 2.2 million civilians. And I don't accept that you are accusing me on air and putting words in my mouth. Let's agree on one thing. Professional media and professional journalism is supposed to tell the truth. Let us agree on another thing, to stand for justice and to stand for humanity in 2023. I urge every Israeli civilian, the pro-peace camps in Israel, to stop Netanyahu, the criminal, the far-right extreme Israeli government that took you to this level of violence. Netanyahu had been there for 6 governments. For God's sake, you're talking about the peace process. The peace process, I am a professor in diplomacy. I conducted research. I met with so many Israeli negotiators. In my research, I proved that it was not negotiations and mediation that was practiced in the past 30 years. It was only coercive diplomacy. Let's talk about reality now. This is our job when we speak to the people and to the audiences. Now, 2 million civilians are under the Israeli fires and missiles. Everybody is urging Israel for an immediate ceasefire, humanitarian aid, and protection. Guess what? Everybody is waiting for a permission from the criminal Netanyahu, who is supposed to be held accountable at the International Criminal Court now, instead of being given this accountability, and he is enjoying impunity while he is massacring the women and the children in Gaza. You please don't give yourself the privilege to speak on behalf of the Palestinian woman. I am a Palestinian woman. My kids are being raised under a regime, a terrorist organized state terror. This should not be acceptable in 2023. You are talking about Gaza. In only 12 days, your government, the state organized terror of Israel, had murdered, massacred more than 3,500 Palestinian civilians in Gaza. In the West Bank, more than 60 martyrs have been also
May I ask you something, Ms. Dalal? Do you agree with what happened in Lior? Let me ask you, on the 7th and 8th of October, what happened in Lior with the kibbutz people, do you think that's all right? Who did that? The Israelis did it? Or was it the Hamas?
Netanyahu, for six terms, he had
No,
been
who fired the
convincing whole
5,000
world-
rockets from Gaza?
I'm answering you. Netanyahu had been convincing the whole world that the issue of the Middle East is not the Palestinian-Israeli question, that it's not the Israeli occupation. Rather, it is the fear coming from Iran. Unfortunately, he
Why are you
has
sidestepping
succeeded
my question,
in
Ms. Dalal?
framing-
I asked you a
I am
simple
answering
question.
you because I
Are
have
you
been
okay with
enduring the injustice for
1,200
75
people
years.
being
I
butchered
urge
and
you to
slaughtered?
speak
Are
the
you
truth.
okay with
I
women and
urge you
children
to
being
present-
slaughtered in Israel, on Israeli
I
soil?
urge you to present a professional journalist.
So I'm
to give
asking
me
you a
the
simple
speech.
question. Do
I am
you
answering
agree
you.
with what
I'm
happened on the
answering
7th and 8th of October?
I'm answering you on behalf of the Palestinian population that we have been.
No, but I'm
enduring the
asking you as
injustice
as
and
somebody
Israeli
who is an
occupation
expert
for
in
75
diplomacy, who's a
years.
professor, who's a mother, who's a human being. I'm asking you, do you support what happened with the kibbutz people? Do you agree with what the Hamas did on the 7th and 8th of October?
Please, and don't spin the argument. Of course not. Listen.
You didn't. You don't agree. Do you support the Hamas's actions? Do you support them using schools and colleges and other civilian institutions as basis for firing their rockets? Do you agree with the Hamas cadre entering southern Israel and slaughtering people there? That also happened on the 7th and 8th. Do you agree with all of that?
My answer: nobody on earth. No human being has the right to terminate any other human being.
They don't, right? So then you have to call that out, ma'am. I've run out of time. I have to run out of time. So as a person who's an expert in diplomacy, you have to condemn both sides and you have to take a strong position against an entity that believes wiping out the Jews is their doctrine. Do you agree with an outfit whose doctrine says we need to wipe out Jews? No, I'm asking you, ma'am. I'm asking. Anyway, I've run out of time right now. We'll continue the conversation. Because this needs to be separated. No act against human beings or no act of terror can ever find a backing on grounds of whatever is being claimed to be a political fight. We're going to take a very short break here on The Right Stand as we thank all our guests this evening. Thank you.
Hello, Moto.
Back on The Right Stand with a quick update on what could happen and how things could escalate in and around this entire region, around this Israel-Hamas conflict. First up, the conflict is now currently at the Gaza Strip, where a Palestinian territory and directly under attack, cross-firing by different militant groups, including the Hamas. The West Bank, then it could escalate in that region because this is Palestinian territory, partly occupied, increasing anti-Hamas operations in this region. Then there is neighboring Lebanon, where the Israeli army is clashing with a militant group, Hezbollah, that is backed by Iran, which is watching proceedings very closely, and it's warned of preemptive action against Israel amid this entire Gaza conflict. Iraq also comes into the play, where militant groups are issuing a warning against Israel and the US. And then there is activity in Yemen, where again militant groups are saying they will target Israel and its main ally, the US, not on Israeli soil, but their own soil. So that's the problem where things could escalate. And then, of course, Syria, where Israeli airstrikes have hit the two main airports, Damascus and the Aleppo airport. So things could go out of hand. We're going to call it a wrap on this edition of The Right Stand. Stay with us. Brass Tacks with Zaka Jacob up next.